Tonight, we descend into the shadows of a forgotten era, a time defined by plagues, punishments, and the perpetual consumption of pottage. We are stripping away the veneer of chivalry and stone castles that Hollywood has polished for you. The brutal reality is that most modern people wouldn't survive 24 hours in the 14th century. So, before you settle into your comfortable surroundings, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you find value in these explorations of the past. I would love to hear where you are watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. It is always profound to see who joins us from across the globe. Now, dim the lights, perhaps activate a fan for some ambient white noise, and let us slip back through the veil of time. Congratulations, you have just opened your eyes in the year 1325. The good news? You are still breathing. The bad news? So is everything living inside your mattress. Your bed is a rotting sack of straw, teeming with fleas and damp hay that smells like a stable floor because, realistically, it was a stable floor 3 months ago. Forget memory foam or Egyptian cotton. You are huddled under a heavy wool blanket that hasn't seen soap since the last monarch died, now weighing as much as a small calf due to the accumulated grease and grime. You are jolted awake by the relentless clanging of a church bell. This is the medieval alarm clock, louder, more judgmental, and utterly devoid of a snooze button. Your home is a single-room wooden hovel with no windows and a communal floor plan where your family, the livestock, and a small army of insects share the same freezing space. The air is a symphony of stench, stale ale, unwashed skin, goat musk, and the creeping scent of mold. Scented candles are a luxury for the gods. Here, you just breathe the dirt. As you stretch, your joints protest. At 22 years old, you are functionally middle-aged. Your spine groans like a rusted gate, and your bare feet hit a floor that is either muddy from roof leaks or crusty from the resident chickens. Privacy is a myth. You wake up surrounded by siblings and a random cousin who simply never moved out. Welcome to morning in medieval Europe, where you are never alone because the parasites never sleep. Now that you have crawled out of your haystack, nature calls, and it isn't a polite request. This is the moment you would trade your soul for a flushing toilet. In 1325, relieving yourself is an adventure, a social ordeal, and occasionally a public health crisis. If you are a peasant, your bathroom is a wooden bucket tucked behind the hut, likely already overflowing because a family member had a disagreement with some bad turnips. The stench is biblical. You do your business and then perform the great medieval disposal, you toss it into the street. If you are polite, you might shout, Garde l'eau. A corruption of the French Gare de l'eau, meaning, watch out for the water. Streets in medieval towns are essentially open sewers, a slow-moving sludge of human waste, animal offal, and mystery fluids. If you are lucky enough to use a public latrine, you will sit shoulder to shoulder with strangers in a drafty outhouse where ventilation is a cruel joke. Toilet paper. Non-existent. You will wipe with straw, moss, or a handful of leaves. If you are in a castle, you might have a garderobe, a hole in the stone wall that drops waste directly into the moat. It's efficient until you realize that attackers have been known to climb up through those very chutes. Whether you are a serf or a baron, the morning ritual is a humiliation. One slip on a wet cobblestone, and you are face first in history's leftovers. After surviving the latrine, you might crave a comforting breakfast. There are no lattes here. Breakfast is a grim necessity, a wooden bowl of pottage. This is a thick, gelatinous stew made of whatever didn't rot overnight, grains, beans, and perhaps a stray leek. It has been simmering in the same pot for days, with new ingredients simply dumped on top of the old. It's an edible archaeological dig. To wash it down, you have a hunk of rye bread so dense it could be used as a blunt weapon. Because wheat is for the elite, your bread is bulked out with sawdust or ground acorns. And what do you drink? Beer. At 6 a.m., everyone, including the children, is drinking weak ale. The water in the local stream is a cocktail of parasites, so fermented grain is your only safe bet. You start your day slightly buzzed and chronically malnourished. Meat and cheese are fantasies reserved for feast days or the local lord's table. You chew your gritty bread, ignore the rat droppings in the corner, and prepare for a day of labor that would break a modern athlete. Getting dressed takes 30 seconds because you only own one outfit. It is a coarse wool tunic that you have worn for months without a single wash. Underwear is a luxury, most go commando beneath layers of scratchy, sweat-soaked fabric. There are no washing machines or dry cleaners. If you want to clean your clothes, you have to haul water from a well, boil it over a fire, and scrub it with lye that burns your skin. Most people simply don't bother. Your shoes are untreated leather flaps with the arch support of a banana peel. Most peasants go barefoot, stepping through dung and over sharp rocks. This constant exposure means your skin is a battlefield. Everyone has lice. The nobles, the monks, and the children are all walking insect farms. You will spend your day scratching at rashes that have no names and no cures. There is no hydrocortisone, there is only the itch and the hope that the infection doesn't turn your leg black by Tuesday. If you were to smile at a neighbor, they wouldn't see white teeth, they would see a graveyard. Oral hygiene is non-existent. By 25, your mouth is a collection of cavities and receding gums. Some might chew a twig to clean the gaps, but mostly, your teeth are left to rot. Sugar is beginning to arrive for the wealthy, meaning the rich actually have worse teeth than the poor. Toothaches are the background noise of life, a throbbing pain that leads you to the barber-surgeon. This is the man who cuts your hair and, with the same unwashed iron pliers, yanks your molars out by candlelight. There is no anesthesia. An infected tooth isn't just a nuisance, without antibiotics, it is a death sentence. Sepsis from a simple cavity claims more lives than many wars. And in a world of constant halitosis, no one is judging your breath because everyone smells like a decaying swamp. Work in 1325 isn't a career, it's a slow-motion suicide. 90% of the population are peasants tethered to land they do not own. You rise with the sun and labor until the light fails. Your tools are primitive, heavy wooden hoes and rusted sickles. There are no weekends, only the occasional saint's day to keep you from total collapse. You plow fields by hand, carry water until your spine permanently curves into an S shape, and pull weeds until your fingernails bleed. If you are a woman, your labor is doubled, you work the fields, care for the children, cook the pottage, and spin the wool. Children start working at age 5, there is no school, only the rake and the plow. If you break a bone or catch a fever, you keep working. If you stop, you starve. In the eyes of the feudal system, you are an organic machine that is easily replaced when it finally breaks down. In the Middle Ages, the weather is a divine punishment. Winter is a season of slow freezing. Your hovel has gaps in the walls large enough to throw a chicken through, and windows are merely holes covered in oil-soaked cloth. Firewood is expensive and often illegal to gather from the Lord's forest. People have been executed for stealing a fallen branch. You wake up with frost in your hair and toes so stiff they feel like ice. Summer is no better. Your home becomes a clay oven, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and fermenting waste. Flies swarm your food, and mosquitoes make sleep impossible. You sweat through your one wool tunic, but you cannot take it off because of social modesty and the fear of sunburn. Heatstroke is simply called taking a bad turn, and there is no relief but the shade of a tree you are likely too busy to sit under. Water in 1325 is a weapon of mass destruction. That bubbling stream looks inviting, but upstream, a tanner is dumping chemicals and a neighbor is emptying a chamber pot. Every sip is a gamble with dysentery and cholera. This is why small beer is the universal beverage. The brewing process kills the deadliest bacteria, leaving you in a state of mild, permanent intoxication. It's the only way to tolerate the reality of your existence. Bathing is even more terrifying. Medieval science suggests that hot water opens your pores to pestilential air, meaning washing could actually kill you. People prefer the protective layer of filth. If you must bathe, it requires hours of hauling and heating water for a leaky wooden tub. Most people go through life with a crust of dirt that acts as a second skin, which the church considers a sign of piety. If you fall ill, the doctor is your greatest threat. Medicine is based on the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. If you have a fever, the doctor assumes you have too much blood and proceeds to drain you with leeches or a dull blade. You are literally bled until you faint, all in the name of health. Surgery is conducted without painkillers, using tools heated over a fire just to make them look official. They believe disease comes from miasma, bad smells, or as a punishment for your sins. Got a stomach ache? You must have had a blasphemous thought. The cure is often more laxatives and a heavy dose of prayer. If you survive the treatment, it's a miracle; if you die, it's God's will. Evening rolls around, and you return to your hvel for dinner. But even your food is dangerous. Preservation is limited to salt and smoke, meaning meat is often high, a polite term for rotting. Bread is the biggest risk. In damp years, rye develops a fungus called ergot. Eating it causes hallucinations, gangrene, and convulsions. Entire villages have gone mad after a bad harvest, believing they were possessed by demons when they were really just poisoned by their own sandwiches. Furthermore, eating is a legal minefield. The deer in the forest belong to the king. If you are caught with a poached rabbit to feed your starving children, you could be blinded or hanged. Every bite of food is a balance between starvation and execution. In this world, the church is the ultimate authority. It controls your time, your thoughts, and your afterlife. You live in constant fear of excommunication and the vivid descriptions of hell provided by the local priest. You cannot read the Bible, it's in Latin, so you must trust whatever the man in the robes tells you. 1/10 of everything you produce goes to the church as a tithe. If you have 10 eggs, 1 belongs to God. If you have no money, you are spiritually bankrupt. Religion provides the only hope for a better life, but that hope is gated behind a wall of taxes, rituals, and the constant threat of being branded a heretic. Being a woman in 1325 is life on impossible difficulty. You are married by 14 to a man chosen for his land holdings. You are expected to produce an heir every year, yet childbirth is the leading cause of death. There is no prenatal care, only a midwife with a prayer and a bucket of warm water. If you don't die in labor, you spend your life in subservience. If you are too smart, you are a witch. If you are too loud, you are a nag and might be fitted with a scold's bridle, a metal cage for your head. You have no rights, no property, and no voice, surviving only through endurance and the grace of a society that views you as an auxiliary human. Violence is the punctuation of medieval life. Law and order are arbitrary. If you steal, you lose a hand. If you lie, your tongue is bored through. Trial by ordeal is common, you might be forced to hold a red-hot iron. If your hand heals cleanly in 3 days, God has declared you innocent. If it festers, you are guilty and executed. Public executions are the primary form of entertainment. People bring their children to watch hangings and burnings as if they were attending a carnival. Domestic violence is encouraged as discipline, and street fights over livestock are daily occurrences. Life is cheap, and the threat of a dagger in the dark is as common as the cold. If you reach the age of 40, you are an elder. Most of your peers died in the cradle, as infant mortality claimed half of all children before age 5. Your body is a map of scars, missing teeth, and broken bones that never set correctly. You have survived the Great Famine, the shifting borders of wars, and the relentless march of the seasons. Death in 1325 is rarely peaceful. It is a messy, painful exit involving fever, infection, or exhaustion. As you lay on your straw mattress one last time, you aren't mourning the life you lived, you are likely just glad the itch is finally stopping. This was the reality of the Middle Ages, a cycle of filth and faith where survival was the only true victory. Death in the Middle Ages was never an abstract concept, it was a constant, looming neighbor. It arrived through farming accidents, minor wounds turned septic, or a neighbor's drunken outburst. It came through crusades that collapsed into chaos or a simple walk to the market that ended at the hands of a bored bandit. Then there was the great mortality, the plague, which could transform a thriving city into a silent cemetery in a matter of weeks. Famine was equally relentless, thinning out entire villages over a single bitter season. If you were truly unlucky, you might consume spoiled grain and spend your final hours in a fever dream, screaming at the walls. Funerals were rarely the solemn, polished affairs we imagine today. Bodies were interred hastily in shallow mounds to contain the spread of rot and disease. In this era, you didn't reach a peaceful retirement, you simply stopped appearing at the plow. So, how has your hypothetical medieval day been? You've woken up in filth, utilized a wooden bucket, and brushed your teeth with little more than hope. You've labored until your spine groaned and scratched through itchy wool, all while dodging the many ways the 14th century tries to kill you. If you still dream of being a gallant knight or a noble lady in a high tower, understand that those images are myths polished by centuries of fiction. The truth was gritty, cruel, and profoundly stagnant. If you were born into poverty, you died in it. Even the nobility lived in drafty, smoke-filled refrigerators, called castles, facing a coin flip's chance of dying from an infected splinter or a politically motivated poisoning. Life was a relentless endurance test. Yet, in the midst of this darkness, humans still sang, loved, and told stories. Tonight, as you enjoy your central heating and indoor plumbing, take a moment to thank the ancestors who survived the rats and the feudalism so that you could live in the light. Long before she was the Great, she was merely Sophie, a minor German princess born in 1729. Her family possessed little power, but Sophie possessed a razor-sharp intellect and a quiet, burning hunger for something more. Raised by a cold, social-climbing mother and a distant father, she learned early on how to navigate the world through observation and charm. At 14, she was summoned to Russia as a potential bride for the heir to the throne, Grand Duke Peter. Sophie arrived in the freezing capital of St. Petersburg with a diplomatic smile and a secret plan. She didn't just learn the language, she absorbed the culture. By converting to Orthodoxy and taking the name Catherine, she burned her bridges to Germany. She was no longer a pawn, she was a player. Catherine's marriage to Peter was a prison. Peter was immature, obsessed with toy soldiers, and openly contemptuous of the Russian people. While he played war games in his bedroom, Catherine spent her nights reading Enlightenment thinkers like Voltaire and Montesquieu. She made herself more Russian than the Russians, cultivating allies among the military and the clergy while her husband alienated everyone he met. She knew the court was a viper's nest where letters were read and every move was monitored. Catherine wasn't just waiting to inherit a throne, she was preparing to take it. She recognized that in Russia, power wasn't a gift, it was a prize for the most audacious. When Peter III finally took the throne, he dismantled his own authority within months. He offended the church, insulted the army, and signaled his loyalty to Prussia, Russia's enemy. Catherine saw her opening. In July 1762, she launched a swift, bloodless coup. Supported by the Imperial Guard and her lover, Grigory Orlov, she rode through the streets in full military regalia and was proclaimed empress. Peter, abandoned and confused, surrendered within days and soon died under mysterious circumstances. Catherine was now the sole ruler of an empire she wasn't born into, taking the crown through sheer force of will and strategic brilliance. Catherine didn't just want to rule, she wanted to modernize. She styled herself as a servant of the Enlightenment, maintaining a decades-long correspondence with Voltaire and Diderot. She attempted to codify Russian law through her ambitious nakaz, instruction, which spoke of equality and the abolition of torture. However, she was also a realist. She knew that to keep her crown, she needed the support of the nobility, which meant she couldn't, or wouldn't, free the millions of serfs who powered the nation. She walked a permanent tightrope between the progressive salons of Paris and the brutal feudal realities of the Russian heartland. Under Catherine, Russia's borders pushed outward in every direction. She waged successful wars against the Ottoman Empire, securing the Crimea and vital warm water ports on the Black Sea. She also participated in the partitions of Poland, effectively erasing the nation from the map to expand Russia's reach into Europe. She wasn't just a conqueror of land, but of culture. She built cities, invited German settlers to farm the steppes, and transformed Russia into a continental superpower. To Catherine, expansion was destiny. She wanted an empire that was feared by its enemies and respected by its peers. Catherine's private life was as legendary as her politics. She had a series of lovers, most notably Grigory Potemkin, who served as both romantic partners and political advisors. She rewarded them with estates and titles, but she never allowed them to overshadow her authority. Despite the misogynistic rumors spread by her enemies, including the infamous, fabricated tales involving animals, Catherine viewed her sexuality as a natural part of her life. She was a woman who lived on her own terms, separating personal pleasure from the cold calculation of governance. The greatest challenge to her reign came from within, the Pugachev rebellion. A Cossack named Yemelian Pugachev claimed to be the resurrected Peter III, promising to end serfdom and lower taxes. The uprising was massive and bloody, exposing the deep-seated rage of the Russian peasantry. Catherine responded with overwhelming military force. Pugachev was captured and executed in an iron cage, but the revolt changed Catherine. The philosopher queen became more conservative, realizing that the Enlightenment had its limits in a land defined by the knout and the plough. By the time she died in 1796, Catherine had ruled for 34 years. She left behind the Hermitage Museum, a modernized education system, and a Russia that was wealthier and more formidable than ever before. She even pioneered public health by being the first in Russia to be inoculated against smallpox. Though she never resolved the tragedy of serfdom, she moved Russia firmly into the modern era. Catherine the Great proved that power is not merely inherited, it is crafted, defended, and worn like a suit of armor. She remains a mythic figure, a woman who navigated a man's world and forced it to bow to her image. Behind the imperial portraits, Catherine the Great was a woman of profound isolation. She surrounded herself with a curated circle of courtiers, lovers, and artists, yet her memoirs reveal a woman who trusted almost no one. Her relationship with her son, Paul, was defined by mutual distrust. She viewed him as a threat to her Enlightenment progress, while he grew to resent her very grip on the crown. Her deepest partnership, with Grigory Potemkin, evolved from a passionate romance into a foundational political alliance. When he died in 1791, Catherine suffered a wound that never truly healed. She was a master of narrative, posing as the mother of Russia, a warrior, and an intellectual. Yet, beneath the title of the Great, which she never bestowed upon herself, was a survivor of betrayal and scandal. She did not just wear a crown, she redefined the criteria for deserving one. Deep in the humid Chiapas jungle of southern Mexico, the ruins of Palenque hold the echoes of the ancient Maya. In 1994, a breakthrough occurred when archaeologist Fanny Lopez Jimenez noticed a hidden chamber beneath Temple 13, a modest pyramid adjacent to the famous Temple of the Inscriptions. Inside, they found a pristine, unlooted stone sarcophagus. As the lid was lifted, a cloud of brilliant, toxic red dust rose like smoke. Within this crimson fog lay a skeleton covered in powdered cinnabar, mercury sulfide. The woman was adorned with a jade mask, necklaces, and diadems made of shell and jade. Despite the royal splendor of the burial, there were no glyphs to name her. She became known as the Red Queen, a woman of the 7th century Golden Age whose identity remained a total enigma. Her burial was not a mere disposal of remains, it was a spiritual transition, cloaked in color and silence. The most haunting element of the tomb was the thick layer of cinnabar. To the Maya, this was no aesthetic choice. Cinnabar symbolized blood, the sunrise, and the life force connecting the human world to the divine. It was a substance of transition. By bathing the body in this vibrant, toxic powder, the Maya were preparing the Red Queen for deification. The substance itself is mercury sulfide, a volatile chemical that can cause tremors and hallucinations. While the Maya may not have understood the modern chemistry, they clearly respected its potency. Only two major burials in Palenque featured this intense cinnabar coverage, the mighty King Pakal the Great and this mysterious woman. This shared ritual suggested she was either his equal in status or his spiritual counterpart, prepared to cross into the underworld, Xibalba, drenched in the color of sacrifice. Surrounding the Red Queen were offerings carefully selected for the afterlife. Unlike the golden hoards of Egypt, the Maya prioritized jade. To them, jade represented eternal life, the green of the jungle, and the breath of the gods. Only the highest elite were permitted to carry it into death. The jade mask, a mosaic of tiny tiles designed to protect the soul and preserve her identity before the gods. Bone needles and obsidian, ritual tools that suggested she may have been a priestess or a high-ranking healer. Ceramic vessels, once filled with food, drink, and incense to sustain her spirit during the dangerous journey through the cosmic layers. These items were not luxuries, they were a spiritual map designed to help her ascend from the limestone crypt into the divine realm. Who was she? The lack of glyphs has led to decades of debate. The most compelling theory is that she was Tiziakbu Ajah, the wife of Pakal the Great. She was a noble woman who married into the dynasty and birthed 3 kings. Her proximity to Pakal's tomb, just feet away, suggests a deliberate pairing of husband and wife. However, DNA testing introduced a twist, the bones showed no direct maternal link to Pakal. This ruled out the theory that she was his mother, the powerful Queen Sak Kuk, but it supported the spousal theory, as a husband and wife would not share maternal DNA. Some still speculate she could be a royal ancestor or a high priestess whose name was purposefully withheld to emphasize her ritual role over her earthly identity. The Red Queen existed in a world where royal women were far from passive. In Maya civilization, women were diplomats, regents, and power brokers. Pakal's own mother, Sak Kuk, ruled as regent until he came of age, proving that women could hold absolute power. Across Maya sites like Yaxchilan and Calakmul, murals depict queens standing as equals to kings, leading ceremonies and negotiating warfare. The colonial lens often erased these women, portraying them as silent figures, but archaeology tells a story of negotiated power. The Red Queen's jade mask and cinnabar burial suggest she was a central pillar of the Palenque dynasty. Her bloodline was likely the glue that held the royal order together, serving as a bridge between the gods and the people. The design of the tomb itself was a masterpiece of Maya cosmology. Temple 13 was not just a building, it was a gateway. The descent into the crypt via a narrow, steep staircase mirrored the ritual journey into the underworld. Unlike Pakal's sarcophagus, which is covered in ornate carvings of rebirth, the Red Queen's tomb is stark and silent. This minimalism was likely intentional, focusing the spiritual energy inward on the transformation of the body. The tomb is aligned east to west, mimicking the sun's daily path from life to death and back to rebirth. Sealed for over 1,300 years, the chamber was a limestone cocoon, waiting for the moment the Red Queen would rise from the crimson dust to tell her story once more.